introduce our keynotes. Senator Krueger, Assemblyman Zembrowski. We're so lucky also to have a Goldman Award winner, Alfred Brownell, Indigenous Canadian leader from the Boreal, Val Courtois. And of course, we're also joined by a wonderful speaker from Indonesia, Hairul. So I will dive into all of that in just a moment. But first, let me open up a little PowerPoint just to get us situated. And here we go. So we're here to talk about the New York Deforestation-free Procurement Bill, which gives immense hope for forest, climate, and biodiversity and all who love them. I think everyone here on this call does in fact love our planet and is here in order to help step up and defend our beautiful forests with this bill. We're so lucky to have the champions of the bill on the call with us who will share their thoughts, and also some voices from the Global South who will explain to us what some of the impacts are. So here's today's agenda. I'm just going to do a very quick overview of why this law matters and the crisis that we're in, what forests deliver as solutions. Then we're going to hear from our champions, Senator Liz Krueger and Assemblyman Zembrowski, about their thoughts on how New York can take big action on a world stage and build on the CLPCA and really show the whole world what New York can do. After that, we're going to smoothly transition into why this is so necessary and how this bill can reverberate all around the world, from Liberia to Canada to Indonesia, all around the world. I think it's clear that this bill and bills like it can save the last standing forests and really transform the lives of people in them. So we have some wonderful speakers in that. Then we're going to have a couple just really quick popcorn interventions from some of our key NGOs that have been helping to promote this bill. Friends of the Earth, NRDC, National Wildlife Federation, Earth Belt Sierra Club, we're all here. People will chime in. Of course, there's questions you can ask anytime in the Q&A box. And at the very end, we're going to broaden this out to a big open Q&A for people to chime in, speak up, and we're going to go through all the things that you all can do to support the bill, stuff that we had thought of, and open it up to thoughts that others have about what they would like to do that we might not have thought of. So let me just really quickly map out, why is this law important? This law would transform New York's procurement of high-risk agricultural commodities. And these are often tied to terrible deforestation, which is a major contributor to climate change. But the deforestation and fires that go with them are often carbon bombs. They're responsible for mass extinction and global biodiversity loss. Let's all keep in mind also, it's not just an environment question, it's a people question. Agriculture is the world's biggest employer, and the high-risk deforestation commodities often have terrible labor rights abuses. Alfred Brownell, the Goldman Award winner, who's going to speak to us about his work, is, of course, along with many others, fighting against the impacts that deforestation and companies engaging in deforestation have on human rights, on labor rights. There's child labor, slavery, trafficking, and other kinds of abuses. And let's just remember that there's a small number of commodities that are really driving much of the problem. And if you hone in on them, it can make a huge difference. And that's exactly what this law will do. So this law tightens an existing state ban on the use of tropical hardwoods for government projects, and it would require state contractors who deal in forest risk commodities to certify that their products don't drive deforestation. And without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to say a giant thank you from myself and from the world's wildlife, forests, and people that live in them to our champions who are here to kick us off and inspire us. So Senator Liz Krueger, please take it away. Tell us a little bit about what this means to you.
Great. Well, thank you so much for inviting me and my partner, Ken Zembrowski, to talk to you today. Couldn't be more excited to see so many really important groups in the world fight for climate change here, knowing that you are with us taking on this challenge to get this bill across the finish line. And I have to tell you, I think that the initial presentation pretty much said it all. this bill, even though it's a relatively small bill, can have global impact, because when New York State takes a step, everybody else watches. The other 49 states watch. We're working in coordination with California on a similar bill. And so if California and New York both pass this bill saying, we understand why damage to the forests throughout the world do damage to us all, destroy communities, destroy species of animals that trigger all kinds of other problems, dramatically impact the carbon release from these forests being killed. People need to understand how long it takes to try to regrow these kinds of forests. We don't have that time. And so if New York and California can start to move other states and other countries to do this pretty simple thing, just say, we're not allowing these hardwoods to be purchased by government for our projects. I hope the next step will be saying to the public, let's none of us purchase these products. Let's do a dramatic change in our policies. I think sometimes people don't understand that we passed this wonderful CLCPA and now CLCPA, and then we all get involved in how much money we need to raise to do what by government. Well, CLCPA set targets for emissions, but it doesn't take into account the emissions that we export by consuming products made in other parts of the world. And this bill is a first step to helping everyone understand that that's another gap we have to close by ensuring state procurement is not driving damage in other parts of the world, in this case, in tropical and boreal deforestation. And so I think that it helps people also understand not everything is about where's the money come from. This bill won't cost us any money. It's not a budget item. This is about saving our planet through changes in our local policies. And my door is ringing, don't mind me. And taking a step forward in exactly the kind of policies we should be taking in very similar patterns soon after. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ken.
Thank you so much, Assemblyman Zembrowski. Please share your thoughts with us about why you brought this and what it means to you.
Thanks so much, and thanks to Senator Krueger for being such a great partner in this and so many other issues. We work really closely together, the Assembly and the Senate, on various issues, and she's been a champion in so many ways. So it's been a privilege to work with her on this. And thanks so much to all the champions and advocates that are on this Zoom today for collaborating on this and so many other vital issues. Quite simply, I think of a few things I could add. Quite simply, what are we going to be? Are we going to be part of the solution or part of the problem for some of these things? And I think for New York State as a global leader and also certainly a national leader and a state with an enormous purchasing power, it is incumbent upon us to be taking steps to both ensure that we are not part of the problem, but also setting an example for other states and other nations on how we can start to tackle this problem. I believe this bill will make systemic changes in the purchasing of these type of products, which will lead to, I think, less degradation to our forests, but it also forced transparency across the supply chain. I think way too often what happens is there's a willing head in the sand approach to some of this stuff. And so if you don't have to worry about the beginning of the supply chain, then you don't. And that beginning of the supply chain oftentimes is what leads to deforestation and other environmental issues. Look, 18 million acres of forest are being lost to deforestation every year. And so we have no time to wait. Each year we wait, each session we wait. That's another 18 million acres that aren't coming back. As Senator Krueger said, the time it takes for regeneration of these forests, especially in areas, quite frankly, we know they're not going to be, is not a chance we can take, and quite not something the globe or the environment can take. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the panel today. And I see so many champions and so many experts, and we're going to work together to get this done in the legislature. Thank you.
That was a ringing call to action. I think we're all hearing you loud and clear. And so I am going to now start popping us through a couple of interventions that are going to talk about some of the details of the bill. And it's my great pleasure to pass over the baton to Tim Keating. Tim is going to talk to us a little bit today about how this bill applies to tropical hardwoods and how it closes the gap in the original New York tropical hardwood ban, because I think, sometimes people ask, why is this necessary? We already have a law that is much along these lines, but no, there really is a big loophole. And so Tim is going to walk us through a little bit about the importance of this. And Tim, I'm going to be a ruthless timekeeper. We have 3 minutes for your intervention. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Attell. And thank you, Senator Krueger and Assemblyman Zabrowski. So I've been working on tropical hardwood imports since 1990. And there was a good long period of time where Rainforest Relief, the organization I directed, was the lead group in the country targeting tropical wood as a problem. So I've written out something. I'm just going to go ahead and read from it. It's a little complicated to understand sometimes why selective logging is actually a problem when the industry has been suggesting for these last 35 years that it's actually a solution. So first, it's important to understand the UN definition of forests and deforestation. The UN actually considers forests to be to include tree plantations, monoculture tree plantations, even if the land has been totally denuded of trees, but is planned to be planted with tree plantations, still qualifies as forest according to the UN. Secondly, deforestation does not include the loss of tree cover up to 80%. So it only applies to virtually the entire wiping out of tree cover. So these are two very important aspects of why logging in the tropics has largely been missed as an issue. So it turns out that what we call degradation, largely caused by logging in the tropics, is a major source of greenhouse gas emissions, in fact. And also, there's so much of it happening that two major studies early on, starting in 1999, another one in 2005, showed that if one actually looks at degradation in terms of area, then the UN numbers for deforestation should actually be doubled. So I asked one of these researchers some years ago if that includes greenhouse gas emissions, and he said yes. These are not calculated under the term deforestation. So a more recent study has actually shown, a number of them actually now, that degradation is actually producing more climate change gases than deforestation in the tropics. So this is a huge problem. And one of the major factors about logging is that once the loggers have gone into primary forest, bulldoze roads to get to these trees, those roads actually precipitate the majority of what we call deforestation directly caused by agricultural clearing. So New York State—
I'm just going to step in and say there's only 1 more minute. I'm sorry.
Okay, great. So New York State passed a law in 1991 to address its own use of tropical hardwoods. However, unfortunately, we weren't aware of the bill moving through the legislature at that time. I was in New Jersey at the time. And the only people who showed up were industry lobbyists. And so there were concessions made. The bill passed with major loopholes, one of which was that the list that was meant to be exemplary of tropical hardwoods actually became the banned list. Therefore, woods like Ipe, Greenheart, Eki, major construction woods at this point, and populating our waterfronts throughout the state and major other uses, pilings and whatnot, were not on the list. And so these woods have not only continued to be used, but actually become the major tropical wood imports in the country. And the second was it exempted plywood, which at the time made up 80% of US tropical wood imports. So this bill has amendments that we have been looking to get moved through the New York State legislature for the last 30 years, I kid you not. And this is why this bill is so important for at least to address logging in the tropics. Thank you.
Tim, that was wonderful. And, you know, you've been a champion for 30 years trying to address this, longer than that, actually. So it's wonderful to see your many years of efforts coming to fruition, finally, we hope, with this bill. And I'm next going to have Jeff give us a 3-minute overview of how this bill applies to forest risk agricultural commodities like palm oil, cocoa, coffee, rubber, etc. And also what this means for supply chain transparency, which is something that Assemblyman Zebrowski also raised up, this key issue of transparency and traceability. Jeff, over to you.
Thank you, Attell, and thanks everyone. Can you hear me? Yeah, I'm going to hopefully be incredibly brief, and some of what I have to say has already been said, but I want to get us to our forest defenders coming up here from the global south. Across the tropics, as we've said, from the Congo Basin to the Amazon to the forests of Southeast Asia, the largest driver of deforestation and intact forest degradation is the expansion of agro-commodity production for palm oil, soy, cattle, paper, timber, and cocoa and coffee, a handful of other commodities. A point that I think we need to, one of the things that I think is very important about this bill is that the industries producing these commodities do much more than cut down trees and burn carbon-rich peatlands to convert land to ranches and plantations. They drive local and indigenous communities off their lands. They coerce, bribe, and intimidate them to accept unacceptable land grabs and illegal operations. Across the tropics, there's an epidemic of violence against indigenous land defenders. Roughly 4 land defenders are killed worldwide every week. The second deadliest sector associated with this violence is agribusiness. So we all know, I think, that industrial agribusiness is devastating the climate, but it's also very literally killing the best defenders of the planet that we have. The products of this violence, the palm oil, the soy, the cattle, the timber, the paper and pulp, end up on our supermarket shelves in the form of snack foods, cosmetics, single-use paper products, plywood, and pet food. And it doesn't have to be this way. Thanks to the tireless advocacy by shareholders, activists, responsible businesses, hundreds of companies exposed to these supply chains now have policies and procedures to eliminate tropical deforestation and human rights abuses from their operations, but implementation is spotty, incentives are weak, and regulatory oversight is virtually absent. And that's what makes this bill so unique and important. Writ large, government procurement dollars are one of the biggest pots of money in the world. And this bill is part of a groundbreaking effort to leverage this public money to save our global forests rather than continue to destroy them. As Assemblyman Zebrowski said, you know, it's in the interests of business to hide where these products are coming from. And what this bill does is it takes the language that a lot of the leading companies are already using in their policies, and it puts it into a regulatory framework to say we need to know where these products are coming from in order to root out the violence and root out the destruction of our forests. And so the goal ultimately is to create a level playing field to ensure that all businesses at risk of driving deforestation, degradation, and human rights abuses have the same set of requirements to create and enforce a set of standards that will prevent the loss of the world's remaining forests. And I don't think we need to go into the details of the, how the transparency will be driven by this bill. We'll get to that in the Q&A if we need to. The main point is it starts right now, right here in New York. So thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. And next up, we have Jen Skeen, who is from NRDC, one of the great experts on the boreal that we've all been relying on, and I think a champion for making sure that the boreal forests are not forgotten. And I think, we will touch on later a little bit of how boreal aspects got pulled out of the California bill, which Senator Krueger alluded to, is sort of similar legislation that's currently being looked at in California. And New York is the last staunch defender. And I think a lot of that, is due to you, Jen, and all your hard work. So over to you. Please walk us through a little bit about what this law means for tackling the problems in the boreal.
Thanks so much, Atel, and thank you to Senator Krueger and Assemblyman Zabrowski for your championing of this bill. And I also just wanted to say a huge thank you to the Indigenous leaders and land defenders who have very generously given their time to join us today. And I will say, I want to foreshadow, I'm very glad to have Val Courtois on the call today, who's much more of an expert on the boreal than I am, and to speak to her really incredible work and experiences. So we'll fortunately be passing it over to her soon. But just quickly, this bill is really groundbreaking in its global approach with its inclusion of the boreal forest. For the last 30 years or so, the international community has really focused almost solely on the global south, turning a blind eye to the pretty devastating logging practices in forests in the global north. And this bill would, for one of the first times, hold supply chains in the boreal forest to the same standard as tropical forests. Fewer people are familiar with the boreal than the tropics, even though it's just to our north. But just quickly, the boreal extends across Canada, Alaska, Russia, Scandinavia, and parts of China and Japan, and it has some of the world's last large remaining stretches of primary forest, which are irreplaceable forests that have unique value for climate and biodiversity. The boreal is the world's most carbon-dense terrestrial ecosystem, storing twice as much carbon per acre as tropical forests, and it's home to treasured at-risk species and is the nesting ground for billions of migratory birds around the world, including many of the birds we treasure seeing in our backyards in the US in the spring and the fall. And as Val will discuss, it's also the home of indigenous communities from tribes and First Nations in North America to the Sami in Scandinavia and the Evenki in Russia. Unfortunately, unsustainable resource extraction and the impacts of US supply chains, as I mentioned, are not confined to the tropics. The boreal is really ground zero for some of the world's fastest primary forest loss. In recent years, the first and third highest intact forest loss in the world has occurred in Russia and Canada, respectively. And in the last 60 years, Sweden has lost over 70% of its lichen-rich forest to the logging industry and ranks first globally in tree loss per capita, just ahead of Norway, Canada, and Russia. And of course, along with the logging, the impacts of this logging on the climate, biodiversity, and indigenous rights have gone ignored for far too long by governments and the international marketplace. And this doesn't just present a boreal issue. The global North's deflection of its own responsibility is also a major reason previous international agreements like the New York Declaration on forests have failed to propel meaningful action, not just in the North, but in the tropics. If there's no credibility among global countries in the global North, we're not going to get very far. So just to wrap up, this bill is a really groundbreaking measure to ensure that sourcing from the boreal is done sustainably and in accordance with Indigenous rights. With the recent signing of the Glasgow Declaration on Forests this past fall, it's more important than ever that governments set the stage for a whole of planet approach to forest protection. And in passing this bill, New York will send a strong signal that boreal countries need to align their policies and practices with the exigencies of the climate and biodiversity crises and help shape a truly global framework that is equitable and comprehensive. So thanks so much for joining today.
Thank you, Jen. That was a very sort of heartbreaking and troubling and for me, guilt-inducing, but also inspirational call for us to really think through how the global north needs to take a big step towards ending some hypocrisy and real responsibility. And I think you're right that this bill does that. This bill encapsulates that. Moving from the global north to the global south, it is a tremendous honor for me to be able to introduce Alfred Brownell. Alfred is a Goldman Award winner, which is often called the Green Nobel Prize, the Green Nobel. And he rightly was a recipient of this incredible honor for all of his work that he has done in Liberia to defend people and forests. Alfred, I know that you have a lot to share with us about why this law matters around the world, why this bill should pass, what it'll mean for people in Liberia and in all the other countries that you've worked and also been a champion in, because I know that your efforts go now far beyond Liberia. Thank you for being here. Over to you.
Thank you, ETL, and thank you for all of those who have invited me. And I will just, focus just on this process. Firstly, Senator Krueger and Zabriskie and our allies and champion within the New York Assembly, thank you very much. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. History will surely remember you. My prayers are that my adopted state, Massachusetts, is actually listening and hearing you. We need a deforestation-free procurement bill for Massachusetts. Since I have only 3 minutes, I will speak directly to the issue. My country, Liberia, hosts the largest block of what was once a forest blanket covering all of West Africa and a portion of North Africa. The New York Deforestation-free Procurement Bill will protect not only that forest, which is the lungs of West and North Africa, which is also the biotic and hydrological pump of that region, and it is the largest carbon sink in that region, but it will also prevent the destruction of precious habitat of endangered animals like the pygmy hippos, the forest elephant, the giant pangolin, and chimpanzee, and avoid the obliteration of shrines, burial grounds, and centuries of history, culture, religion, tradition, and values that the indigenous people hold sacred. For the last 25 years, I have dedicated my life to protect these forests, which are affected by deforestation, environmental and human rights abuses in supply chains in my own native Liberia, which also end up halfway across the world, even here in the United States. I'm sure you do not want me to narrate all of the horror stories associated with my struggle. I have deliberately decided not to use PowerPoint and images because I wanted us to have a conversation with you, not to scare you or make you feel that there's no hope based on the struggle and the challenges that I faced, but to tell you a small story. So permit me just to bring a snapshot of one of that story. I want you to close your eyes and listen to this story. It is just a paragraph. Ma Anantu is an indigenous woman, a grandmother of 65. She was stripped naked, flogged by the police, and sent to prison naked, only because she stood up holding her grandchildren's hands to protect the destruction of this forest. She and her grandchildren were willing to pay a price for protecting this forest. If you pass this bill here in New York, you will ensure that the Upper Guinea forest will continue to perform its natural functions and responsibilities, has been the lungs of both West and North Africa. You will also prevent the migration of millions of young Africans from crossing the Sahara Desert and the perilous Mediterranean Ocean to travel to Europe. You will also prevent them from traveling from Africa to Latin America and joining the caravans onward to the southern border of the United States. You will be putting people smugglers and human rights traffickers, bandits, and unaware criminals out of business. I have put my life and that of my family on the line. Security guards and private militias of an international agricultural company threatened to cut off my head, eat my heart, and cannibalize me. I'm currently living in exile with my wife and kids in the United States because of the same forest. Poor indigenous communities have paid a heavy price. Around the world, environmental defenders have been slaughtered at the rate of 4 persons per week. These defenders are sacrificing their lives for the planet every week. I have paid a price. Passing this bill could just be the least price you could pay. What are you willing to do? Thank you.
Alfred, I have chills, and I think probably everybody else does too, when we hear what you say, when we reflect on all your sacrifice and knowing everything that you have done. I think we must do everything in our power to pass this bill. Really, you're an example for all of us. Alfred, thank you so much for those words, for sharing all of that with us. It's very moving. And I think next we're going to have also an incredibly moving speaker, somebody who's also really putting their life on the line. It's Val Courtois, who's coming to us from Canada. Val, can you share with us a little bit about your struggle and what this bill means for you?
Thank you so much. And first of all, thank you for the honor of speaking with you this morning. I'm joining you from my home territory that we call Tessinan, also known as the Quebec-Labrador Peninsula. I am a member of the Innu Nation, originally from Mestouillats and what is now known as Quebec. And my mother is Quebecoise, so I'm of mixed heritage. And I'm the director of the Indigenous Leadership Initiative, which is the only national Indigenous-led conservation organization in Canada. We work with all First Nations across Canada. And just for context, when I say now referred to as Canada, what I mean is that underlying the assertion of the state of Canada is 51 nations, 634 communities, 51 Inuit communities, and countless Métis communities. These are places that we still hold title to. And when you think about the action of the Canadian governments and the provincial governments that control forest lands, generally speaking, we do have high standards of practice, but it doesn't stop the problem of deforestation. And let's just use Ontario for an example. Ontario systematically underreports deforestation by 17%. What does that mean? It means that every year there are over 40,000 football fields that are deforested and not growing back. There is also a real kind of blindness to the impact of some forest activities. And by the way, I'm a forester, so I'm a fan of the idea of forestry, just not the way that it's always applied in the boreal and in particular around the caribou. And so my nation is a caribou nation. We are, our whole place in the world revolves around our relationship and responsibilities to caribou. They permitted our survival in the Quebec-Labrador Peninsula for 10,000 years so far. And unfortunately, what we have in Canada is of the woodland caribou species, only 22 of the 30 are what's qualified as self-sustaining by the federal government. What that means is that there's actually 60% chance of that caribou self-sustaining. For a people that depend on caribou for food security, that's nowhere near a target that is acceptable. And not to speak about the big migratory herds in the north. I live really close to a herd called the George River herd, which was in the early 1990s, the largest herd of ungulates in the world. It is now down to about 8,000 in its numbers, way below the threshold we need to ensure our food security. There are 60,000 Indigenous peoples who rely on that one herd alone. So what can we do? Well, one, you can recognize free, prior, and informed consent. We're one of the only countries that has passed legislation around the application of UNDRIP, and we are waiting for the action plan from the Government of Canada on how that will apply, in particular to resource development in this country. And we see it as an opportunity to be part of the decision-making. Our standard of living in Canada for Indigenous peoples is quite a bit lower than the average Canadian. In fact, Canada is consistently number one on the UN index, and we're somewhere around number 67 on that very same index. And the other thing we could do is really support certification schemes like the Forest Stewardship Council, which has a number of principles that are integrated into it, including considerations around deforestation and free, prior, and informed consent, as well as sustainable use of forests with habitat protection in mind. So maybe I'll leave it there. Jen, you did a great job of kind of couching the importance of the boreal. The only other comment that I'll make is that the real advancements we're making as Indigenous peoples here in Canada are significant, and I think could be a real example to other areas in the world of what it looks like to trust Indigenous peoples to make decisions and what those implications then mean for the rest of the people around them. And so I'm really keen on Canada being an example for the rest of the world of what it could look like to have Indigenous peoples in the driver's seat, making decisions for the good of everybody in the world.
Val, thank you so much. Those words about empowerment of Indigenous people are vital, and I think they're falling on really receptive ears. And a big part of what I hope this bill, and what I think a lot of us hope this bill will do, is to weave respect for Indigenous rights into law, which, as you said, is kind of the bedrock. And it just meshes so much with what Alfred was telling us about the importance of listening to Indigenous voices and hearing and really following a lot of the wisdom and the guidance. And this brings us back to something that Jeff had evoked, the importance of recognizing that there's no being neutral here. We're really either part of a problem or part of a solution. And that was something that Assemblyman Zembrowski had said. So that brings me to the next speaker. It's a great pleasure to introduce the director of WALHI, South Sumatra, Hairul Sobri. WALHI is the affiliate of Friends of the Earth in Indonesia. And WALHI is one of the, for those of you who don't know, it's one of the most impactful, influential environmental organizations in all of Indonesia. And they have done amazing work both for forests and for people. So Hairul, we're thrilled to have you here and eager to hear what you think about this bill. What does this bill mean for you?
Thank you, Etila. Good morning. I am Hairul Sobri, Executive Director of WALHI South Sumatra, Indonesia. One of the areas Sumatra Island that is affected and will be continuously prone to deforestation and forest fire. I am honored to be here, witnessing one advanced initiative and could help us prevent more deforestation in Indonesia. As you may be aware, there was a big haze disaster in 2015, a mix of man-made and climate-based disaster that caused us loss of life. Lost opportunity to breathe the fresh air, school, and carry out our daily activity. That was a dark period that everyone should see the impact of the denial of sustainable land and forest management, not only to human life, but also to the environment, not only to Indonesia, but also to the global world. As we believe that we live on one earth and breathe the same air. What happened in Indonesia may affect another part of the world, and it works conversely. Pulp industry and palm oil company are a major sector that are responsible for deforestation in Indonesia. Their product go to everywhere around the world, including United States. So we should be mindful with what consume every day. We believe big brands like Colgate, Palmolive, Ferrero, Cow, Marx, Mandalay, Nestle, PepsiCo, Protect, Gambler, and Unilever are still sourcing from conservation company like Sinarmas, APP, and Royal Golden Eagle. So in this moment, please allow me to call you all to ask those brands to transparent with their forest footprint and stop sourcing from controversial supplier. Lastly, we are hoping that this bill will push timber and palm oil players to stop doing any deforestation in Indonesia or elsewhere. This bill will and should assist us in our effort to save forests in Indonesia and the climate of the global world. Thank you very much.
Hairul, it's us that thank you, because Walhi has been so courageous in fighting against deforestation for palm oil and pulp and paper in Indonesia. And you all have done so much to defend the rights of indigenous people that are affected by land grabbing. But even also, I think it's good for everyone here to know, Walhi and other indigenous and community defenders in Indonesia have been increasingly bringing lawsuits for haze, because when the forests are burned to make way for palm oil plantations and also pulp and paper, there's often terrible smog. It's thought that it killed 100,000 people in 1 year alone. It caused over 100,000 premature deaths. And I know Walhi has been leading the charge for haze justice, justice for the families and the people affected. So Hairul, we are the ones who thank you for your work, your sacrifice, your courage. It's really wonderful to have you on here. And now we've heard from all kinds of voices about what impacts this bill can have far afield. I think we're going to bring it back home to the United States. And I'm going to hand this over to my colleague from National Wildlife Federation, Marcus Sibley, who's going to talk to us a little bit about what does this mean for New Yorkers now that we've heard from people around the world? What can we do? What should we do? Marcus, over to you.
Good morning, and thank you, Tel. Good morning, everyone. My name is Marcus Sibley. I'm the New York Metro Director of Conservation Partnerships for the National Wildlife Federation. My states include New Jersey, Connecticut, and here in New York, where our wonderful first partner is Environmental Advocates of New York. I also serve as the New Jersey statewide NAACP Environmental and Climate Justice Chairman. And I mention that because of the correlation with today's topic. During the first part of my day, I work with wonderful people and collaborate with other organizations to try to conserve our precious resources and promote responsible development of renewable resources. And during the second part of my day, as an activist, I work with wonderful people and collaborate with other organizations to conserve our precious resources, also known as people, and promote responsible policing and governing of communities. What's the correlation? Well, as Congresswoman Krueger and Assemblyman Zabrowski alluded to, that's transparency. The same way we need transparency when it comes to law enforcement practices and internal policies, we need that same transparency when it comes to the supply chain of the goods that we utilize in this state and in this country every single day. But what's the other correlation? The communities consistently and disproportionately exploited for the gains of others are the same: our Black, our brown, our indigenous, and our poor. What we consume here impacts communities around the world. So this bill is about equity. It is about justice. It is about proving what kind of people we truly are. I hear the term environmental justice quite often, but the New York Deforestation-free Procurement Act is the opportunity to show solidarity and to stand for environmental justice and to stand for indigenous rights. We have the power in numbers. So let's use those numbers for messaging that conveys the magnitude of this issue. Let's not let the fights, the advocacy, and the sacrifices of people like Alfred and Val and Hairul and many others be in vain. My name is Marcus Sibley, and I thank you very much for your time. And I hope we can all let New York be the first so that all the other states can follow. Thank you so much, Atel. Have a good day.
Wonderful. That is so great, Marcus. And actually that brings us right into the next part of what we were going to discuss. We were hoping to dive right into what New Yorkers can do. Rich from NRDC is going to talk to us about lobby days. Jeff is going to talk to us from Friends of the Earth about email action alerts and how we can sort of pre-organize some stuff from our small team that has been working really hard on this law with different NGOs to share with all of our sister NGOs so that everyone can just tweak and adapt and adjust or use with relatively low lift of your precious time. So you want to be respectful of your time and energy, which is a lot of different competing priorities, of course. Jen from NRDC is going to talk to us a little bit about some of the harmful Canadian lobbying against the bill. And I know that we just heard from sort of the best that Canada has to offer, which is Val, but there's also been this darker side of what Canada officially and industry in Canada has done to try to harm this bill. So Jen will talk a little bit about what you can do to stand up and fight back on that. And Liz is going to, from Sierra Club, Liz is going to walk us through this sign-on letter that we've prepared, that we hope everybody here can sign on to and share widely. And then Zach is going to kick us off with a little crowdsourcing discussion about what it is that people on this call or people that we know in our networks can volunteer. Alfred has told us he's going to bring the fight to Massachusetts and try to get the Massachusetts deforestation-free law going. I know there's people here who could bring more power to the bill from working with local New York media, contacts you might have with local TV and local radio. Some folks on this call have amazing videographers. Other people have fantastic connections with influencers on TikTok, celebs, late night shows. There's so much that we could all do with art, with creativity. So Zach's going to help unleash all of that creativity and bring us to exactly what Marcus closed out his comments on: messaging. We've got to win this battle because we are going to be up against some of the biggest, baddest agribusiness in the world. And I think we should anticipate that there's going to be a strong pushback from industry. And we've got to be ready to match that with a push forward. So without further ado, I am going to hand this over to Rich, who's an amazing expert at getting great legislation forward in New York. And Rich, you're going to, I hope, be able to elucidate for all of us a little bit about the plan for lobby days, how we can all come together and be stronger together.
Great. Thanks, Utal. And thank you, all the advocates, for all the inspiring discussion today, as well as thank you, sponsors, Assemblymember Zebrowski and Senator Krueger. And both have been champions in so many parts of our environmental and climate campaigns. There's an awful lot of other of my colleagues on this call who do a lot of work in Albany and who work on environment, climate, public health work. And we work closely together on so many different fronts. So looking forward to working on this bill. I'm going to be very quick here. I just want to mention two parts of what we need to do and then get into just a suggestion as far as our next steps on lobby day. New York State government, like state governments most places, it's got two houses. The Senate's the upper house, the Assembly's the lower house. Senator Krueger, our sponsor in the Senate. In the Senate, it goes into a committee called the Procurement and Contracts Committee. The chair of that committee, Senator Reichlin Melnick, is also a co-sponsor of the bill, which is a very helpful and important piece. There are some Senate Democrats on that committee, not co-sponsors yet, so we'd want to talk to them in our lobby day. Secondly, on the Assembly side, Assemblymember Zebrowski, our sponsor, is the chair of the Government Operations Committee, which is where the bill will go. So that's very important and very helpful and gives us some real standing as far as where the bill moves. There are some Democrats on that committee that are not on the bill yet as co-sponsors. We want to speak there as well. Generally speaking, one of the things we want to look to is not only getting as many co-sponsors as we can in both houses, but to look at priorities. And those are members who sit in the Environment Committee, who are going to be very, very sensitive and possibly very open and supportive of a bill like this. So we would want to meet with them as well on a lobby day. At the same time, we want to meet with some senior members who chair some of the more senior and more powerful committees in both houses, the chairs of the Committee on Corporations, Committee on Judiciary, Committee on Codes, which is actually a committee that does a review of legal issues, penalties, et cetera, fines and fees. All of these are important members that we would have in our target range as far as lobby days. Where we are right now, and I'll get to the governor in a moment, where we are right now, we're in the middle of a massively important and all-consuming budget process, which many of us have dozens of issues we're working on. And that will be done April 1st. I think this governor and this legislative leadership wants to get it done April 1st. My view is let's begin some conversations and start kicking in the next couple of weeks meetings, but let's look for a formal lobby day that first week of April after the budget's done. So that would be the 4th, 5th, and 6th. Those are days that the legislature's in session. I still think April will be still doing Zoom calls. I could be wrong, but I think we'll still be doing Zoom calls where there's something easier and also, though, unfortunately, something more distant on it. But that's something we're happy to arrange. We'd love to have all of the organizations and stakeholders on this call be part of those lobby days. We would set up meetings. We'd have lobby teams that would go to the key members that we're going to be targeting that day. I also think we need a second lobby day. It's going to be a wind sprint from April 2nd when the budget's done till a very early ending of the session, June 2nd. It's the earliest I've seen in decades. So we've got a 2-month period really. And one of those in April, there'll be at least a week, maybe 2 weeks with the legislature will be out of session. So we have a lot to do in that period of time. I'm suggesting a early April lobby day as well as an early May lobby day. We would very much be wanting to help set those meetings up. People who want to do that, please contact our team. We'll put together the contact list and such, and we'll create teams for those days. We got the messaging and all the other issues that others are going to be speaking about as far as outreach to your members in your organization. On the governor's side, we would meet with the governor's team in the 2nd floor. That's the West Wing. We'd also would meet with agency heads or agency officials who are going to be relevant to the bill, whether it's the Department of Environment Conservation or the Department of General Services. I think some of those meetings actually should take place earlier. We want to be doing that from now, before the budget's finished, just to get the conversation going. But they would be also meetings we would set up on the lobby days as we set them up.
Thank you so much, Rich. As you can all see, there is a huge need for many environmental groups in New York to step up and help Rich. So we'll be sending a message out after this, along with the recording, and really asking you to volunteer your staff's time to join Rich. And we're going to have a great plan all written up and organized. Of course, feedback is most welcome. But just to reiterate what Rich said, we really need everybody to step up for those lobby days. So please, when we send you the information about this, please do respond. And I think you'll be in good hands with Rich's leadership. This is not his first rodeo. He's done it many, many times. So I think we can get a win with his leadership. Jeff, could you walk us through a little bit of the email action alert work that you've done to help prepare some cookie cutter stuff that everyone can use?
Yeah, thanks, Atel and everyone. This part I think is really very, very simple. You know, at Friends of the Earth, one of the things that we do, like a lot of environmental organizations do, is send out email action alerts to our members to have them then reach out to their legislators by email and by phone at key moments in the life of the bill. And that's what we're going to do here. Not only, I mean, Friends of the Earth will be doing this, but we will, in order to empower the collective, we are going to produce, well, Rich just pointed this out, we'll produce a list of state legislators whose support we need on the bill. And then we'll produce a simple template email that all of our constituents, that we can all use to mobilize our constituents to email and call their representatives. And ideally we'll do that, you know, before and after each lobby day, because the lobby day is when we, you know, press the flesh, but we want to bring the bill to their attention before and follow up after. So we'll produce a simple call script for that. And we are producing a simple social media kit. We'll put together some graphic memes for Twitter and some hashtags and hopefully some short videos. And that's a piece that we may come back to, actually, especially some of our frontline defenders out there, Val, Alfred, our friends from Indonesia. Maybe we can talk about getting you all on video, getting some video testimonies that we can put out over social media. And that's the kind of thing. So everybody on this call could expect, you know, a package in the email with those elements so that we can all just use all of our digital channels to keep this thing moving.
Wonderful. And I'll just say that although we're running out of time, we have only 4 minutes left. I'm going to hammer home a little bit of what Jeff alluded to, which is that if we all put all of our social media reach together, we can match the social media reach of some of the agribusiness that will inevitably come to fight this bill. But they have the kind of money that we just don't have. We have solidarity and they have money. So let's use that solidarity. We will be providing a pack that will be easy to use. And we're really hoping everyone can lean in together because we are stronger together. And Jeff is gonna lead a little bit of that, and we'll be following up with all of you on that as well. Jen, I'm mindful of time. Could you just give about a 30-second overview of some of the work you're doing to pull together a coalition to counter the harmful Canadian lobbying?
Yeah, sure. Just really quickly, as some of you know, Canada's federal and provincial governments have pretty aggressively opposed the boreal's inclusion in this bill, which makes Canada the only country impacted by this global bill to do so. And it's really a tragedy, not just given the bill itself, but because Canada is really in a place where they could be a strong global leader on this. And so we've been working with Canadian partners to bring out more Canadian voices on this to really demonstrate what's actually happening on the ground, counter some of the industry misinformation, and also indicate and represent that this is not, the opposition angle of this is not representative of all Canadians or even all of the Canadian government, since there are strong champions in there. So we're really working on sort of building some of that momentum and getting more of that narrative in advance of any continued opposition from the government, and really hope to have folks' support in doing that, and also just in emphasizing the dire need to continue to keep this as a global bill, not just for the boreal, but also for the tropics. And we'll be in touch about ways to do that.
And Jen is organizing a doodle for a call for folks who want to work on this Canada angle. So we will be sending that around, and I warmly encourage anyone who is able to help Jen and lean into to join Jen in her hard work there. Liz, do you want to give us a 30-second overview of the sign-on letter, please?
Sure. So the bill will begin moving through committees in the legislature soon, and we really need to build a strong base of support to win. So we have a brand new sign-on letter drafted in support of the law, which will be circulated, and we hope that you can sign on to it and help cross-promote it. The letter is science-based, data-driven, and we really think it will help us engage more lawmakers, help build further support, and help counter the industry's opposition. So we really encourage you to take action ASAP and sign on to the letter.
Perfect. You said it all, Liz.
That was quick.
That was quick. That's great. But that is one of the most important things we're going to ask everybody here to do. And not only, to do it for your own organization, but just like Liz said, to cross-promote it. I am mindful that we're almost at time. We have 1 minute left. And we wanted to open this to crowdsourcing, and any ideas that you want to volunteer. Zach was going to crowdsource from all of you who are able to stay on maybe 5 or 10 minutes extra beyond the time. And also maybe Zach, I can volunteer you to do a crowdsourcing session online with a Google Doc with everybody that we had invited to this. And some people had wanted to come but couldn't attend. So Zach, do you want to do like a 5-minute crowdsourcing? And those of you who have a hard stop, of course, we're grateful that you came. Thank you for participating. Those of you who could stay on a little bit longer, we'd love to hear your thoughts about whatever it is you want to volunteer. And Zach, I'm going to hand over to you.
Great. Thanks, Atel. And yeah, I understand that people have to drop off. And if those, I think people know how to contact if they want further information and can do that. For people who can stay on a little bit longer, I think Atel mentioned it earlier with, we need to get creative. We need to think outside of the box. We know that traditional conservation, unfortunately, despite all the amazing efforts that have been taking place for 40 years, they haven't worked. The trends are in the wrong direction. And for example, I was thinking about on February 28th, the IPC is going to release its 6th assessment report, and it's going to be this section that they released is going to be on impacts to humans and the environment and species from wildlife. And I can already imagine that this report is going to feel like a gut punch. It is not going to be good. And I think that we will all be hearing from people saying, what can I do? And I hope that we think back, to this meeting and to this effort and say, I know something concrete you can do right now. And that is that we need to start cracking down on deforestation. And we've got an opportunity to do that in New York. So I would like to open it up to just a quick conversation of people who have, and I know we're also going to have a Q&A at the end of this as well. If people need to stay on and have not, or need, but want to stay on and dig deeper into some of the issues, we'd be happy to do that. But just quickly on the issue of crowdsourcing ideas about what we can do. Do people have, influencers that they know? I think we've always tried a lot of things, but we have to keep trying. And I'm not suggesting that things that we've done in the past don't work. We just maybe need to do more of them. So I'd like to open that up. We were already thinking about at NRDC, some of our board members who might have a wider reach, like can we reach out to them? That's one idea. So I'd love to hear from other people about ideas of how we can get the word out and tell the story about how New York is going to be a leader in helping fight deforestation.
I see a lot of shyness. I could just throw out some ideas here, which is like an art build in front of a Grace Manor, because the California bill that's similar to the New York bill got vetoed at the last minute by Governor Gavin Newsom last year. So they're going to have another bite at the apple this year. But never underestimate that the governor could cut this off at the knees, even if it passes through the legislature. How about artists in front of, here in Manhattan, working on something like a beautiful art build? Or I even have one of my belly dancing teachers did belly dancing with people impersonating trees. It was a beautiful thing. It was very video friendly. It went viral on TikTok. Art builds.
I just joined this. I'm sorry, go ahead.
There's a climate accelerator group in Rochester, and I believe one of my friends is working with an art group, and I will pass this on with her to see if it's something that could happen here.
That's great. And one of the things I wanted to mention about it is also teeing off of events that are happening. And I do international wildlife conservation work. And so I'm aware of, the big reports coming out from the IPCC. I'm not aware of the things happening in people's local communities all the time, and especially in New York. And so we can use even those local opportunities of a particular local event, a recycling drive that's taking place in a community, or a school that is putting on, some kind of effort in the local news around, what they're doing for climate change. We can build off of those kind of opportunities. So if people, as people see those things coming across their calendars, I wouldn't want us to pass over them as opportunities to potentially plug into. So if you have any of those ideas as well, of things that we can tee off of, that would be helpful. And we can share those as part of a Google Drive as well.
I see in the chat we have an idea from Catherine, maybe connecting this to the Poor People's Campaign. And I think actually one really important question that brings to mind, which I think that's a great one, Catherine, is what can we do to reach out more to other communities in the New York environmental justice space and human rights space, and folks that are not necessarily just environmental groups, which are here on this call. So any kind of cross-pollination that we can think about with other groups. And Val, do you want to chime in?
I was just saying here, it's because Canada has always been known as a country of nuance, and this is our problem. Lobbying action in the reality of nuance requires a little creativity here. And relatively speaking, we have decent forest management standards as a country compared to other parts of the globe. The problem is that we're not striving for the best. Canada, any country who should be doing well, it's us. We've got all the conditions for this to happen. We're one of the largest countries with the remaining biodiversity. We have a responsibility to take that leadership. In order to counter the industry lobby, they don't respond very well to influencers and kind of environmental voices, unfortunately, in Canada. What they respond to is other professionals questioning their own professionalism. So I think one of the really important tools that you could assemble here is a group of foresters from Canada who specialize in the management of boreal, who can counter those crazy claims by industry that say, you know what, there's no deforestation in Canada. Well, actually, here we go. We've measured it. Counter that. So I think that should be one of your tools to consider, at least in the context here in Canada.
I love this. This is great. Yeah. Justin, your hand is up.
Yeah, I had two thoughts. The second one is sort of coming off of what Val said. And the first was, I know there is I think there's a climate march that Fridays for Future is organizing in like the end of March, maybe March 25th, something like that. Keeping an eye out for local iterations of that. I'm sure there'll be one probably in New York City, maybe in Albany. It'd be something to plug into to make sure that this is part of the conversation. I think there's a lack of broader awareness, even among, climate activists of these issues, this bill. So trying to find ways to plug into that and to, piggyback off of that would be good. And then the second piece, sort of building on what Val said in terms of hearing from professionals, I think it would be great to hear from some of the companies who have successfully implemented these kinds of policies. What have they done? How have they done that? What has been their experience? I think, we will face some pushback from companies big and small who will say this is impossible, it can't be done. So having a group of professionals to speaking to other professionals about that aspect that is possible to achieve transparency and traceability and meet these standards within your supply chain and still make a profit and still sell what it is that you sell.
Fantastic, Justin. Yeah, if anybody in this group thinks that they might be able to get corporate endorsement for the law, that would be so powerful. There are many companies that have come out to endorse the EU deforestation-free law, but not a lot of New York companies that have come out to support the New York deforestation-free law. So we got to fix that. Tim, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, New York City provides an opportunity for sites to do actions, partly because this bill is unique in that it has the tropical hardwood amendments. The Brooklyn Bridge is decked with tropical hardwoods. South Street Seaport, Pier 17 just was redone with jatoba from Brazil. So, if anyone is looking for a good place to do some sort of protest action or something, just get in touch. And the list is long. We used to call New York City the ground zero of rainforest destruction because of all the tropical hardwoods from the west all the way around the southern part of Manhattan to the east into Brooklyn. And it's just the crazy Fulton Ferry Terminal list goes on and on.
Well, this has been great. And I know, go Amanda.
Oh, it's okay. I was on mute. But I had one other thought, which is just, this is a personal thought, less than a professional one. But my mom was a procurement officer in Nassau County. And so I was just thinking about AFSCME or maybe just a letter from some, retired procurement officers about how, even if they're not procurement officers for New York State, but trying to get at that professional level as well, something saying this seems like the right thing to do, not so much, I could implement this or I could understand why we would want to do this, something along those lines, wondering if that would be impactful.
Fantastic. It's amazing once we all get our creativity together, this amazing jamboree. And I saw also a super awesome suggestion from Jeff in the chat about maybe getting a big mass here in New York of the Catholic Church to do something for the Laudate Si encyclical that Pope Francis had put out for the planet and what this could mean for New York. Jeff, do you want to chime in on that? Or was it the Catholic Church of Canada? Sorry, not New York. But
I think that was Catherine from Sisters of Mercy.
Oh, sorry, Catherine. Please chime in. That was a great one.
Well, actually, we could certainly use it in New York as well. But, Canada, they have the Catholic Church is relatively strong there. They've had some bumps on the road with the boarding schools, but this could be an issue that they might embrace. There are a number of religious communities. I studied there actually for 2 years back in the 80s, I guess, late 80s, no, early 90s. But there's a organization that's similar to the one we have here. Phyllis is the head of our LCWR Region 2. That's Leadership Conference of Women Religious in the state of New York. And they have a similar conference up in Canada. I think it's called the CRC, Canadian Religious Conference. And they have the Jesuits are there. The Jesuits are up in Canada. The church in Canada might really embrace this. A lot of women's religious communities. In fact, I have a friend who's in one. She's in France because she's on their leadership team, but it's a possibility.
Makes me think maybe we should reach out to the Green Faith group. And I know that Reverend Harper, who's the head of Green Faith, is based either in New York or New Jersey. Yeah, it's a great idea to bring this as a moral imperative and frame this as a moral question. I see so many wonderful things in the chat, and I know that we are 13 minutes past the hour. Zach, you got us going with this wonderful brainstorming. Maybe we can also continue it digitally. We can do like a Google Doc and invite everybody to chime in there, and I'll try to capture everything that people had written up here, and we can move forward with the crowdsourcing ideas that way. So I think what I'll do now is I will just say a huge thank you to everyone who attended. We are so thrilled to have you join the party, the Deforestation-Free Law Party. And it would be wonderful to get your support. It would be wonderful to have a broader coalition really beefing up and leaning in to fight deforestation around the world. As you have heard, this is such an important subject. People's lives are on the line. We have people here like Alfred who have literally sacrificed so much. And we can honor that sacrifice by doing something right here, right now, that will be really beautiful. I have faith that New York can do it. I believe in us. I believe that this is possible. I think that we can change the world, and we can start right here. So I would like to thank everybody who's on the call. And of course, most importantly, to the staffers of Liz Krueger and Assemblyman Zembrowski who are here. Please do thank them from all of us from the bottom of our hearts. We're so, so grateful for their leadership in these dark times. They're like a ray of light. Thank you. Okay, everybody. Take care. Be well. Be safe.
Bye-bye.
Have a great
Thanks,
weekend.
everybody.
Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Yeah.